Hello, listeners. Welcome to this month's podcast. Slightly different from our previous ones, which have just been a basic argument for about 25 minutes. This month we have racing driver Ben Green with us today. Brentwood boy through and through, so we started in our Brentwood Karting Race League. As you may have seen earlier this month, we put a status on our Facebook and on our Instagram asking you guys for some questions, what you would want to ask Ben. I'll give you a bit of background about Ben, then I'll hand you over to Ben, and then we'll start some of the questions. So Ben used to race in our race league back in 2011, pretty competitive driver, managed to win our All-Star Cup, which, as some of you may know, is our end-of-season race where we invite back our current drivers, former drivers, and future drivers for a one-off race at the end of each year. So I'm going to hand you over to Ben and explain a bit about what he's doing this year, where he's gone from leaving Brentwood, and then we'll go through some of the many questions that we have on our social media. So, hello, Ben.
Hello. So I started at Brentwood obviously in 2011, as Dan said, and then progressed, did about a year and a half at Brentwood, racing every Sunday, obviously in the academy. So learnt a lot in that time, progressed a lot as well. So quite an important part of my career, I'd say. And then went to owner-driver karting through the junior ranks of car level car racing, and then up to where I'm now, which is British GT3 in the BMW M6 GT3 car. So we're racing that in British GT this year. It's about a 600 horsepower car, weighs about 1,300 kilos, so basically the same as about a Corsa, Vauxhall Corsa, so quite a light car for the power we've got, and obviously immense grip from the downforce and the big slick tyres we have as well. We compete against Aston Martins, Lamborghinis, Mercedes, Bentleys, obviously other BMWs, McLaren, a whole host of other supercars. So it's a really competitive grid featuring some great drivers as well. So I'm really enjoying the competition this year.
Okay, so looking at some of the questions we have on our social media, I will start with a question from Lex Wakeman, so a driver that you used to actually race against in our race league.
Yeah, back in the day.
His question is, if you had the opportunity to be teammates with any racing driver, past or present, who would you choose and why?
Well, I'd say present, I would go for Daniel Ricciardo, purely because he just seemed like a good laugh. And I think obviously he's fiercely competitive, very quick driver, and he just seems very chilled out guy, and someone would be great fun to have as a teammate. Other than that, really not too sure who I'd want to go with. There's a lot of quick drivers out there, and people that are a good laugh. So yeah, Daniel Ricciardo's here's my one at the moment.
Michael Schumacher's the correct answer, but we'll let you off. So I have a question. So we have Lewis Deacon, who's another driver from our race league actually. He's got two questions. One is, what is your best race you ever had at Brentwood? And what is your favourite memories of karting? So what's your best race at Brentwood?
So yeah, racing at Brentwood in the All-Star Cup in 2012, in probably towards the end of the year, I'd guess. Yeah, won that race. That was the first kind of big event I won at Brentwood. I never won a championship. I think I came top 3 once. So yeah, kind of wasn't ever that quick at Brentwood. It was pretty quick, but it was never fighting for championships. But I managed to win the All-Star Cup when it was very competitive. A lot of the old faces came back for that one in particular. And I really enjoyed that actually. So that was a good one when it was raining as well. I've always kind of gone well when it's raining. So yeah, that's quite a good race and a good memory as well, obviously. Other memories from karting, I remember when I was probably 14, 15, jumping in a KZ gearbox kart. I've been doing pro karts at the time. So to jump in my mate's gearbox kart at 14, 15 years old was a pretty surreal experience. And threw me in a deep end to begin with. And you kind of, as soon as you experience speed like that, it's nothing really holds you back anymore. So that's quite a good memory I have from karting days.
Not a Brentwood memory then, no?
No.
Do you still get nervous before a race, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, sometimes. I think a little bit of nerves is good because it shows that you care and it matters. I mean, if people say they don't get nervous, I think they're lying, to be honest. Because the amount of pressure that's on people in motorsport these days, especially at this level, there's a lot going on. So people get nervous. It's normal. It's just how you respond to those nerves is the key thing. And for me, I respond to it positively. I think the pressure of the race weekend, the pressure of the race start, most of the time makes me perform better. And I think that's the key ingredient to being successful in this sport, is being able to manage the pressure, and any sport really, being able to manage pressure and perform when you're under that kind of pressure.
Next, I got two questions. They're very similar, so I will read them both out. What's your advice to progress from karting to cars, and what is the best advice you can give to young drivers looking for sponsorship?
So yeah, there's two schools of thought here. You can either, so this is obviously for progressing into cars. First question. The way I did it when I went into cars was I went straight from club level karting to racing in probably the most competitive junior car championship in Europe. That Ginetta Juniors has always been a competitive championship and really is top level racing. And we went into as a privateer, running a team ourselves, running the car ourselves, which I think was a good learning for me. But there are certain drawbacks, certain positives as well that I think I wouldn't change that. But if you have the opportunity to get into cars, I'd say do it sooner rather than later. There's no real need, in my opinion, to go to Super 1 level or European level in karting, unless you're set on becoming an F1 driver and you're very young and you've got a good backing, because at the end of the day, it's so expensive. The gains are so marginal, and when you get into car racing, no one really cares too much what you've done in karting, to be honest, because it's just completely different. It's a different kettle of fish. So I'd suggest trying to get into cars as soon as you can. Just either club level or national if you can. Obviously, the higher level, the better. Normally, obviously, the higher level comes with costs. But if you go into a series like, say, Ginetta Junior, it's much easier to get sponsorship than at a club level in something else as well. So it's kind of what comes first, chicken or the egg. Can you get the sponsorship for a series you haven't raced in before? That's quite a difficult thing to do. If you can manage to do it, then you'll reap the rewards. So if it's one of those things, if you can get into a higher level racing with good TV coverage and you've got the skill as well, then you're always going to benefit from that. But equally, I'd just say, get into car racing as soon as you can, really, from the age of about 15 onwards.
Okay, next question is, I've got two questions from Grant Flashman. His son Ollie races in our race league, double champion now. So his two questions are, do you have any pre-race rituals or any superstitions? And at what age did you start racing cars? At what point did you realise you could be a professional driver?
So pre-race rituals, I pretty much don't have any, and I think it's important to be like that, because it's one of those things. If you rely on it to kind of get your head in the game, it can work when you're young, but I think it's also quite a brittle thing to have as well. Because say you can't do your pre-race ritual because you're running late or there's something that goes on or whatever, then you won't get your head in that same kind of state. So I think it's important to be able to kind of just turn it on like that, literally like a light, just turn it on rather than having to have a ritual, because then you're kind of limiting yourself in a way in terms of elite performance kind of thing. What's the other question?
I've forgotten. No, it was at what age did you start racing and what point did you realise you could be a professional racing driver? So
I started at age 13 in karts, 12, 13 at Brentwood, and then moved to cars at 17. Obviously now I'm 21, so about 3 years in each level. And I'd say when I thought I could become a professional in some way in the world of motorsport, I thought somewhere during my first year in cars. We went up to the highest level of junior car racing, really UK, Europe. And wasn't doing too bad for a privateer team running it ourselves. So I think if you can do that, it's probably showing something. So for me, that was quite a positive step forward. And then as the years have gone on, I've just kind of kept learning and kept improving at quite a decent rate. I think I'm quite a quick learner. So now I'm getting a bit more seat time, getting a bit more experience under my belt, because the guys I'm up against ultimately have a lot more experience than me. So it's difficult to compete sometimes, but again, now I'm getting that experience. I'm getting closer and closer to the factory drivers now, and I think within a couple of years I'll be trying to make a career out of it, definitely.
Another question is, over the last few years, your results have improved massively. There was a big turning point in your career. What led to that?
I'd say I've always had kind of raw pace in terms of I can jump in a kart or in a car and generally do okay. I've always been okay at that. I've always been quite inquisitive as well, kind of looked into things a lot, data, video, any extra marginal gains. I've always that's always been my kind of habit. So I think, naturally, if you're always looking to find more, then the longer you race for, the faster you'll get. You'll just keep improving. So that's kind of quite an important trait, I'd say, of mine. But the turning point, I'd say, which was about 2 years ago in 2017, was I started to manage myself mentally with the help of Dan. He's good for some things. But, mental strength is a big factor when racing. People think physical strength is really important, but the mental strength is probably 2-3 times more important than how strong you are physically. Because if you can mentally stand up against some tough competition, and it can make the difference between where you finish or how you perform over a championship. So I think that's the biggest turning point over the last couple of years. And you still learn. Every day is a school day. Even professional drivers still learn nowadays against other professionals. So I think the mental strength side is something that's really important. And if there's one thing that I wish I'd focused on a bit more when I was younger, would be that. But again, when you're young, it's difficult to know what to focus on. But I wouldn't change too much of how I made my way into motorsport, that's for sure.
I think one thing I picked up from answering that question, it was kind of 2 parts. Both of it was hard work.
Yeah, true.
So something for our younger drivers that race at Brentwood or Lakeside or wherever you race is understanding that if you put the effort in, results usually come your way. If you don't put the effort in and expect it to happen, it probably won't. Another question from Graham Deacon. He says, what is your physical workout regime and what is your diet?
So physical strength is important, keep yourself fit. And it's difficult to say how much you work out, but effectively you work out whenever you can around work and around training. I'd say probably 4 to 5 times a week of training days. So that might include a bit of cardio in the morning, some weights in the afternoon, and then obviously stretching is really important as well. So it's kind of just full body sport, really, motorsport. Obviously people think you just sit there and you don't move, and it's not that much effort. But yeah, when you're in the car and you've got the G's and you're in a cramped seat and it's a very hot car, it's quite important to obviously train and be fit for it. And I'd say the biggest thing for a racing driver to manage is the heat in the car. It's very hot in there, there's very little air ventilation, and it is a bit of a sweat fest in there, really. It's quite hot, so if you can manage the heat yourself, physically, you're used to training in hot temperatures, then I think that is the best way of kind of being fit and being race fit as well. Quite an important thing.
Okay, next question is, where would you like to be racing in 5 years from now? You'll be an old man by then, Ben.
Yeah, that's a few years away. Yeah,
winding down your career.
Oh, low blow. 5 years' time. That's a long time away, actually. I'd definitely love to be working with a manufacturer by then. I think that's a must, really. To have a career, you've got to be in with a manufacturer by your mid to late 20s. That's a given. So yeah, the plan would be to work in with a manufacturer. My goal ultimately is to race the highest level of GTs, be it WEC or DTM. It's kind of a bit of a mixture either way. DTM cars are more suited to single-seater drivers, I think, in the way they're designed and the way they're driven as well. But no reason why it's something I shouldn't aim for. I'd quite like to do it. But World Endurance, DTM, something like that would be fantastic to be involved in. Equally, Blancpain, IMSA. There's a lot of racing out in Asia as well. Generally, GT racing all over the world is where I want to be and what I want to do. So the highest level of that is my aim. And I hope to be there.
Awesome. Next, last question on our Facebook before we move to our Instagram questions. It's probably the most important one. And that is, Ben, if you were a biscuit, what would you be and why? I know this is probably one of the most challenging questions you've had, so take your time.
Yeah, I need to think about this. It's quite a difficult one, actually. I wouldn't be a biscuit. I'd be a mini egg. I do like mini eggs. I think they're great. They taste nice. They've got a nice crunch to them. You get the real mini eggs, not the fake ones. I do like a mini egg. So yeah, I wouldn't be a biscuit. I'd be a mini egg.
This is the kind of information you get on our podcast here at Brentwood and Lakeside.
Important stuff.
That's it. Ben would be a mini egg. There we go. This would be cut down and used as
a real one.
That's it. The expensive one.
That's it. Yeah.
You can tell he lives in Waltham Abbey, can't you? See, this is the bit you'd cut down and use as a promo. Bits about mini eggs, and then that's what's going to be. That's it. Well, Joe's here as well. He doesn't talk much, Joe. Do you, Joe? No. He said no, not really. And then he hid again. Okay, some of the questions from our Instagram, they have come from one of your super fans, actually.
All right.
So I will breeze over them and go for some of the sedate ones. On reflection, what would have... Oh, I read it wrong. What he didn't say that. So, on reflection, what would Ben have done differently getting to where he is today?
I think there's not a lot I'd change, to be honest. I think the way we did it in running our own team, I learned a lot. I had a lot of respect for the sport, for the people in it, for mechanics, for teams, drivers, bosses, everything. I got a very well-rounded feeling of the sport, and I think that's a positive thing to do because, as I say, you can judge situations better, and it gives you a better idea of how the sport works, which is very important. However, it is difficult to focus on being a driver when you've got a whole team to manage in your initial first year of cars and your second year of cars. So that's something I did struggle with back in 2015, 2016, kind of managing the team and trying to race as well. And there's a lot of pressure of things like that. It's one of those things I think it's really good to do, and I wouldn't change it at all. But obviously, as Dan said earlier, it's hard work. And I think the hard work is what got me to where I am. And working with the right people, putting the right people around me, and working hard to make sure that happens. But ultimately, I wouldn't change too much, to be honest. I think the way things go, I think everything happens for a reason, personally. I think the amount of time I spent in karting was key. It was important. I started late, 13 years old, so it's quite late to be at the level I'm at now. And I couldn't waste time going to Super 1 and racing Rotax or X30 or whatever the latest two-stroke is. There's really no need, I don't think. And I only ever raced 4 strokes in karting. The lawnmowers, as such, of the go-karting scene, pro karts and stuff like that. And I think that was the best way to go, really, because it's cheap and low cost, and you get a lot of value for money there, and that's the important thing. And it's good fun as well, and competitive racing.
Next one is, if you had the chance for another career, what would it be? So if you weren't a international racing driver.
That is a tricky one. I've never really thought about it, to be honest.
Want to be a singer?
No, God no. Couldn't sing. I used to want to be an engineer, motorsport engineer, and I quite like that idea. Still, I find it interesting, but it's a lot of information, a lot of studying, and I'm not made out for studying. More made out for sending it in a race car, to be honest. So, in terms of other careers, I'm not too sure, really. I just want to race. There's not too much else to say on that one, really.
Full-time racing driver, then.
That's the one.
There we go. Who's the most famous person in your phone contacts?
Dan Lee.
There you go, yeah. We're still for that one. That can be added to the promo as well. What's your favourite track? Kart. No, scrap that. Brentwood's the answer. What's your favourite car? What is your favourite track?
Where?
Car track.
Everywhere.
One that you've driven, and then one that you'd love to drive.
Spa. Can't beat Spa. It's fantastic. Can't wait to go in the M6 this year. It'll be very quick. And it's just Spa is just, it's something about that place is just really cool. It's the track is just huge. It's smooth. It flows nicely. There's big curbs. There's fast corners. There's slow corners. It's got a bit of everything, to be honest. And to hook a lap up around that track, I think it's something like 7 kilometers long. To get a good lap in there, it's tricky. It's difficult. So I think it's challenging and good fun to drive as well. Tracks that I haven't driven. I'd love to go to Monza. Monza looks really cool. Maybe Suzuka as well. And what's the one in Laguna Seca? Yeah, Laguna Seca looks mega as well. So yeah, these are some of the tracks I'd like to go to out in America and out in Europe, which hopefully that'll be the plan in the next 5 years.
Awesome. Next question. Favourite BMW from the 20th century?
Where's the 20th century?
Now, let's go. What's your favourite BMW?
Oh, yeah, 20th century is like 1900, isn't it?
No, isn't it? Yeah.
We're in the 21st century now. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll respond to him and say, how silly of a question. What's your favourite BMW?
It's a tricky one, that. I've always liked the E46 M3s. You can't really beat them. They're good fun. They're good cars to drive as well. Nice cars to drive. The V10s as well. V10 engine just sounds insane. They don't make them like that anymore, really. in the old Beamers. So yeah, you can't really beat that.
Mine would be the 635 CSI. I like that one. Just because everyone wants to know what my favourite is.
Not.
Yeah. I've got just one or two more questions. And that is all-time sporting hero.
I'm going to be... Am I going to be controversial? Am I not? I don't know. I'm going to say Hamilton, purely because I think he's a fantastic driver. I think some people maybe don't like him because of his off-track stuff, or sometimes his on-track performances when he's in a race or maybe things go against him. But I think as a driver, in terms of qualifying, I think qualifying is, for me, qualifying is what it's all about. There's so much pressure in qualifying to get a good performance, to nail that one lap. There's a lot of build-up, a lot of pressure, and he's just insane in quality. There's no one really as quick as him at the moment. And obviously, yeah, he's got a Mercedes. Everyone says that, but I think you've still got the pressure to do it. You've still got to be able to do the laps, and I think he does a fantastic job at that. So yeah, that's my one.
Awesome, and I was expecting that or Ayrton Senna. I've got two more questions. One is, if you could say one thing to a 5-year-old Ben Green as a word of advice, what would it be?
Start training earlier. Start running. Start cycling. Yeah, I'm not sure really. It's again at 5 years old. I was I'd never even heard of racing. I never even heard of racing until I was probably 10, 11, 12. So yeah, I mean, say starting late like I did wasn't a bad thing. And I think if you started earlier, it's easy to spend a lot of money on it. It's easy to get comfortable in it and not push on as much. So I think starting late has kept me hungry and kept me working. So I'm not sure I'd change too much really. But yeah, the fitness is something that's really important to build up a strength in terms of cardio, long distance endurance events, especially if you're going to go into GT racing where you might be doing a 2-hour stint in the heat of Europe somewhere. So that's what I'd suggest.
Good stuff. And last question, very similar. If you could give a piece of advice for someone who's just started karting at Brentwood, what would it be?
Don't give up, and it'll be hard, it'll be difficult. You have lots of up and down days. I left Brentwood crying my eyes out many times, probably for the first 6 months pretty much, because I was coming last or second last or second last or third last sometimes. And yeah, for 6 months I was struggling big time with the track in the academy. And yeah, you push through it. It's a learning process, and you have to kind of keep going, keep learning, trust in what you're doing. That you know where you want to go, or if you don't know, then get help from other people. And that's kind of the coaching side of things. What at Brentwood, what they do, the one-to-one sessions are really beneficial. I had a few back then, and so it helped me out. See, Dan's pretty good at what he does as well, so he's a good person to talk to. So yeah. It's just, don't give up easily. Don't kind of throw a towel in if it doesn't start working out after a month or 2 or 3. As I say, it took me 6 months before I started finishing before the back of the grid. And I spent a year and a half there total time. So, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Ben. I think that's the last question we had. So, again, thanks for joining us today. If you guys are interested in giving Ben a follow on Instagram, it's at BenGreen2.
Follow the social media channels. I'd really appreciate that. So keep up to date with my progress. And thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thanks again, guys, for your questions. Those of you that sent them in on our Facebook and Instagram or wherever else you were, put them in. Hopefully I've answered everything you guys had. As I said, do follow Ben on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll probably see him around Brentwood and Lakeside karting soon. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you, or you'll hear me, next month.